You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
CYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Just after the end of the Friday night show, we had just signed off, ready for the weekend, and I get a news update that Axios, through Alex Thompson, of course, is the Axios Washington, D.C. reporter who co-authored the book Original Sin with CNN's Jake Tapper, alleging that the media was just as duped as you were, apparently, about Biden's mental collapse, and the White House just duped us all. And of course, 0 out of 100 people in any given survey believe that. But Alex Thompson was finally able to get a hold of this interview audio. And the interview audio is from the Robert Hur Joseph Biden interview from October of 2023, after Biden was under consideration for being investigated for hoarding a series of classified documents. And so Robert Hur sat down with Biden in October of 23 and started asking him a series of questions. And then in February of 24, Robert Hur released his findings, and he found that President Biden was a well-meaning but senile, doddering old man. And the media lost their ever-loving mind. Kamala Harris was screeching. Pete Buttigieg was angry, so mad. All of the Democratic senators were furious. Oh, how could this so blatantly partisan, terrible? The media said it was untrue and just ridiculous. And so then the transcript of the interview was finally released to the public about a month later, and it was just as bad as we were expecting. It was horrible. But there were these ellipses, these dots, that suggested there was some kind of a pause. And so a lot of Americans wanted to know, yeah, sure, the interview looks bad, but hey, were these short pauses or long pauses? And it turns out that the actual audio, which Merrick Garland, the Attorney General for the Biden administration, argued was not able to be released because, someone might never do any kind of interview with the DOJ again. I have no idea after listening to this audio what he's talking about, but to be fair, Merrick Garland never really knows what Merrick Garland is talking about. So there are all kinds of horrible scenes. We ended up coming back on the air unexpectedly, ended up kind of doing a double hitter on Friday to talk about the atrocities that are these particular interviews, including most damning Biden bringing up the death of his son himself, couldn't remember when he was vice president, couldn't remember when his son passed away, couldn't remember when he was in the Senate or not, couldn't remember when Trump was inaugurated into office the first time, could remember nothing. And also, Biden's lawyers effectively ran the interview on behalf of Biden. Here's just a little bit of that to bring you up to speed.
So during this time, we were living in Chambers Road, and there were documents related to the Penn Biden Center.
So here's Robert Hur. He's asking Joe Biden about a series of documents that are referenced in Biden's memoirs. He says, where did you keep those papers? Long pause.
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying.
That is not true. Again, Beau Biden died in 15. He did not die in 17 and 18. That is untrue. Biden has no idea. Again, this is crucial. Biden is saying at this point in my life, the media came out and covered for him. Karine Jean-Pierre and the Kamala Harris crew, everyone, Obama, they came out and covered and they said, well, I mean, hey, you don't remember the day that, if you are one of the people who has gone through the tragedy of losing a child, you don't remember maybe the exact day, but you remember all of these other details. Biden brings up, well, you have to remember at this time you're referencing, my son was either deployed or dying. No idea what's going on. That's a totally different thing, by the way. And by the way, Biden, again, as you remember, in that awful impromptu press conference, got up in front of the country and said, how dare he, talking about Robert Hur. How dare he bring up my son to me? The interview is atrociously long, all kinds of pauses. It's just horribly stinted. I mean, Biden is in fact dead in this particular interview. It's just there's nothing mentally acute or active about him at all.
When the presidency than I did, and so I hadn't at this point, even though I'm at Penn, I hadn't walked away from the idea that I may run for office again. So if I ran again, I'd be running for president.
Again, Joe Biden has made the case. He said, I was never going to run for office ever again. It was when Trump did the Charlottesville thing or whatever that original claim was. That was when I decided to run, which is not during this time at all. So again, Biden has no idea what's going on. Everything is an absolute mess. It's awful. I pointed out that it is extremely suspicious that we're just now getting this. It's kind of funny that now we're getting all of these interviews. But unfortunately, I do have to move on because what comes next is what shook the entire weekend. So, Joe Biden releases an announcement via his family. It says, May 18th, statement from the personal office of former President Joe Biden. Last week, President Joe Biden was seen for a new finding of a prostate nodule after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. On Friday, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer characterized by a Gleason score of 9. That's grade group 5. Again, the Gleason score only goes up to 10. So that's bonkersly advanced. And has metastasis to the bone, meaning that the cancer has progressed from his prostate into his bones. So they say, well, this represents a more aggressive form of the disease. The cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. This is an insanely detailed diagnosis for only being diagnosed with prostate cancer on Friday. I hope you can at least start by understanding that the diagnosis that was provided in this statement, I mean, that's one of the fastest biopsies I've ever heard of in my entire life. Wow. And then it says the president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physician. So first of all, of course, and obviously, we hope, just as the White House and the vast majority of the country on both sides wished, that President Biden has a speedy recovery, that cancer does not win, because cancer is horrible and atrocious and awful, obviously. That said, there is no chance whatsoever that Joseph R. Biden had cancer at this stage for this long and no one knew about it. And that led us, of course, to a series of doctors, political and non-political, coming out of the woodwork on Sunday, yesterday, and today, making the case not just on right-leaning shows, but on MSNBC with Joe Scarborough, that Biden definitely had this cancer for years.
And because it was
Oh, sorry, that was Joe Biden accidentally saying he had cancer in 2022. We'll get to that.
You believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So again, I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh yeah.
He goes on to talk about the numerous reasons why. There are, of course, slips that have been pointed out. Townhall.com got this clip up of Joe Biden in 2022. Saying that he had cancer.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And
so that, of course, caused a major firestorm. The media at the time suggested, and the White House suggested, oh, Biden he had a little lymphoma, had a little skin cancer at one point. Nope. Absolutely not. There is no way. And again, they're making the case that, well, the last time Biden had a physician, they didn't do any kind of testing for this. That's also untrue. Men over the age of 40 are supposed to be routinely tested via blood work. You no longer have to check the prostate for prostate cancer. It is an extremely common kind of cancer for guys to get. It is very detectable very early on. There is no way at all, any way, shape, or form, that people close to Biden did not know about this. And that brings us to some of the most scandalous stuff here. And unfortunately, due to the radio clock, we'll have to bring that over to the live stream. We'll be back in a second, radio crew. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. According to Bradley Devlin, Jacob Adams, and George Caldwell, our reporting team over at the Daily Signal, the documents that Axios has released, some of the audio recordings that we did not have. I don't know how this stuff was left off of the transcript. We don't know how some of this stuff was obscured. It is insane. So according to Devlin, Adams, and Caldwell, the Daily Signal obtained and reviewed the audio of the 2 interviews conducted by investigators on October 8th and 9th of 23 as part of an investigation into the former president's handling of classified documents. Transcripts of the special counsel's interviews with Biden were released in March, but the president was prone to verbal incoherence, meaning that there were a lot of parts of the transcript where there were parentheses and just mumbling incoherently. And none of us had any idea what that meant. So once we got the audio out, Bradley Devlin, our political editor, and our 2 journalism fellows, George Caldwell and Jacob Adams, they sat down and they listened to the audio. And this is where things get really insane. We can understand the stuff that Biden was saying. Now, it is in fact a longer rambling, and we'll link the article so that you can catch some of this a little bit later. President Joe Biden at the time completely forgot the names of people like Jay Leno, former President Obama's Secretary of Defense. Again, remember, Joe Biden at that time was the vice president. He has no idea how he got his own book. He thought Africa was a country. Insane. Biden says, quote, "The Corvette was being worked on because I had to do that show with the and then his lawyer interjected to fill in for him, Jay Leno." Oh my gosh. And this was constant. It's constant all the way through the major fundraisers. George Clooney, Biden had no idea who George Clooney was. Biden had no idea who members of his own staff were. He is full-blown in dementia. In 2023, according to the expose by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, they found that Biden's staffers were planning to get him a wheelchair because of his physical erosion, his physical depletion, as early as fall of 2023. Now, here's the important part. Here's where this all becomes the scandal getting even worse. It appears, based on when Biden visited Delaware and when Biden would sit down and talk with Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, that even in the situations in which President Joe Biden then was in his most lucid, even when President Joe Biden was in his worst, his least lucid, in his darkest depths, he was meeting with Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi in the good and in the bad. According to all of the dates, according to all of the travel logs, according to what we know now especially, there is no chance at all that the other cabinet members didn't know that President Joe Biden had cancer. There is no way that former President Barack Obama, who handpicked Kamala Harris, that Barack Obama, who carried Joe Biden off of the stage after that disaster, there is no way they didn't know. There is no way Nancy Pelosi didn't know. And it is so much worse than just making this about trying to prop up a bad image. We're going to talk about that in just a second. We have to pick up the radio crew back from commercial. This is truly something that makes Watergate look like a parking violation. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. I regret to inform you that after there were numerous, open, extremely flagrant incidents of Joe Biden not only failing mentally, not only failing physically in the way that an individual ages, and as they get older, many of them get frail, but also with the President of the United States at the time almost certainly fighting a more and more and more aggressive form of prostate cancer, going to Delaware at random times, and then hiding out for a while. We discovered that around the time after Joe Biden and Donald Trump had their famous debate in which Joe Biden was dead on stage. I don't say that lightly, by the way. There's an element of being a broadcaster and a pundit where you use flamboyant and analogous language in order to drive home a point. Joe Biden was not mentally present on that stage. He was effectively dead. After that, after the Democrat Party could no longer simply whistle its way past the graveyard, former President Joe Biden was then whisked away back to his Delaware home, as many of us will remember. Jennifer Van Laar, an editor over at Red State, had reported that originally Joe Biden was essentially suffering from a serious medical emergency in Las Vegas in the summer of 24. And legacy media completely disputed this report. And then Joe Biden was whisked back on Air Force One for what they called COVID, but was essentially a serious medical emergency. Now, why do I list all of those things and then bring this back to Obama and Pelosi? Because once the President of the United States was flown back from Las Vegas to Walter Reed Medical Center for a serious medical emergency, you think there was a blood test they didn't run? You think that when they drew the president's blood coming back from that trip or on his annual physical, they didn't run every single test known to man? The President of the United States is the single most medically observed individual on the face of this earth, more than the Pope, more than Bubble Boy. The President of the United States has doctors keeping an eye on him, not just with the glasses and the stethoscope. They have the jeweler's eyepiece out to examine pores that look funny with the President of the United States. And you're telling me they didn't run the appropriate amount of blood work? It is unconscionable, and this is the point. The point is actually not that Jill Biden likely committed very grievous elder abuse. And we'll get to that in just a second. Believe me, I have a whole heap of ire, and the American people, in fact, have a whole heap of ire for people like Meghan McCain and members of the left-wing media that are now trying to walk this back, although it's very difficult because the Democrat Party is effectively destroyed by this. Effectively destroyed, which I don't say lightly. But Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and the cabinet to the President of the United States, Lloyd Austin, who, by the way, left AWOL without any question at all for prostate surgery. You guys ever remember how that was a little strange that Joe Biden never criticized or had any kind of a conversation that we know of with Lloyd Austin, who left just without any kind of announcement whatsoever and left the United States defenseless so that he could get multiple prostate surgeries? Boy, that is rather in some context now, isn't it? Additionally, and what I would argue is perhaps the most damning, these individuals, by the way, cabinet officials do in fact have access to presidential medical records, because there is a point in which the cabinet can, in fact, at the will of the vice president, invoke the 25th Amendment of the United States and remove the president based on his incapacitation. Woodrow Wilson was one of the reasons that the United States Congress first looked to this, although, of course, it would not be passed as the 25th Amendment for many, many years. The insane part comes in that Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, knowing that Joe Biden was not only failing mentally, was not only failing physically with age, but also dealing with an extremely aggressive form of cancer, that they decided to advocate for Joe Biden running for re-election. Remember, it was Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi who wanted Biden to stay in the race until it was impossible. You say, well, we knew that. Why is this a big scandal? The reason that this is a serious scandal is not that Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi wanted Joe Biden to win the presidential election. It's why. Why did they want him to win the presidential election? Knowing that Joe Biden was, in essence, on his last leg again, his own staff had selected a wheelchair model for the president of the United States to be used after the November elections the following year. They originally had selected as early as October, November of 2023. That Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi likely knew that Joe Biden would die in office at the beginning of his second term, or perhaps between the election and the inauguration. Because, again, the presidency is an extremely physically demanding job. It is. Now, the reason that they ran with this particular move is because Joe Biden did not pick Kamala Harris as his VP. Barack Obama picked Kamala Harris as his VP. And this isn't just from me. This is from members on the left who have basically categorized and scripted out this entire memoir of the Biden-Harris campaign. It was Barack Obama who put Kamala Harris in. Kamala Harris, outside of a few awkward kind of ranked elections in California, has never won a single thing. She is extremely unpopular. She is not likable. Her team eventually would hold fake soirees, fake social events for her to try to learn how to be sociable at all. And Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, understanding that Kamala Harris could in no way, shape, or form win an election on her own, they had to sacrifice Joe Biden, an old man, like a sheep sacrifice, so that after he died in office, Kamala Harris would be installed as the first Black Indian woman president of the United States. Because they were stuck with Kamala. There was this idea, oh, it was an open primary. They had all of these people they were considering. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Don't lie to yourself. The Democrats had backed themselves at Obama's request because, again, Obama brought the DEI age into his second administration. That is how he ran his second campaign. The DEI maneuver, this multiracial, multigendered, magical, identity politics coalition, is all Obama's making. And Obama handpicked Kamala Harris and had made this entire framework of the Democratic Party about electing a woman and electing a person of color and electing a woman person of color next. That was where they were going. And because they can't back out and choose somebody else, because again, if you have the person here, why isn't she good enough? After all, she's the right color, she's the right gender. These are things that the Obama team said. They had to keep her in there. And so, again, unlike the case with Edith Wilson and Woodrow Wilson, in which Woodrow Wilson is effectively dead, Edith is governing the country, Joe Biden is effectively dead, and Obama and Pelosi would run him again as long as they could because Kamala couldn't win on her own. And so, therefore, Joe Biden would die in office in his second term. And therefore, Kamala Harris would be elevated to the presidency of the United States of America. It is without a doubt the greatest scandal of the last century. And we'll talk a little bit more about it over on the live stream side of things. Radio crew will catch you. Actually, hey, Allison, before we go to commercial, we were going to run our interview with Clem up next, but I'm pushing that back because we've got a lot more to cover about this. So we'll be back in a second, radio crew. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Yeah, I'm not burning through this one quickly at all. Because now we get over into some of the more scurrilous side of this story, which is, well, then who was running the country? Who was running the country? And there have been people coming out of the woodwork to beg Republicans not to ask this question, because if you ask the question, who was running the country, and you can find a person to point out that was running the country or a group that was running the country, then all of the executive actions that Biden took were illegitimate. They were illegitimate because they were not comported by the President of the United States. This is the real secret of why executive-based action is unstable, and it's not how the country was meant to be run. Because once you question the legitimacy of the actions of the executive, it's just one person, then all of those actions that follow are illegitimate. And James Comer of the House Oversight Committee has made it clear they have now identified the members of the Biden administration, the staffers who ran the autopen that signed a bunch of executive orders into law, the autopen that pardoned a bunch of people that Biden didn't even know he was pardoning, preemptive pardons even. Here's Comer today explaining that the House Oversight Committee is going to be dragging these people before Congress.
You are going and looking at who is controlling this autopen, because Joe Biden, I mean, he's demonstrating that he doesn't have all the cognitive capabilities they had. That interview was from 2023.
Yeah, that's hard evidence. Early into President Biden's term as president, it clearly shows that he was in significant mental decline. It questions who was actually making the decisions. So what we found is not just with the pardons he issued, but many of the executive orders that the courts are now using to Trump-proof, many of the executive orders that President Trump is trying to implement to make government more efficient, many of these executive orders, as well as the pardons of Biden's entire family as a result of our investigation, these were all signed with the autopen. And clearly from that interview, which was many, many months prior to the heavy use of the autopen, Joe Biden wasn't capable of making decisions. He wasn't coherent. We think we've identified who the staffers are. Jason, you all have done great work with that over at Heritage Oversight. We're going to bring everyone that we believe was involved in.
So I would like to point out as a member of the Daily Signal that my dear friends over on the Oversight Project have done a phenomenal job, and I was honored to examine a few of these things before they were released to the public, including the auto-penned signature style, exact same variation of the signature that was used. Again, a robotic arm faking the signature by the president of the United States. Because if the president didn't order the executive order to be signed, then who did? They are legitimately not executive. The president has no constitutional authority to delegate his role as the commander-in-chief, to delegate his role as the chief executive. I don't know if you knew this. That's literally not allowed. The Supreme Court has consistently, in early America, alluded to the failures of governments like the French populist government after the French Revolution for giving away executive authority via the stroke of the goose feathered pen. The idea is that you would have to grab some cheap goose quill to sign over some part of your duties to someone else because it was considered such a cheap and scandalous notion. It had no worth at all. It wasn't the quilled pen or the fountain pen. It was just some cheap goose feather. That is, in fact, what has happened here with the Biden administration. And this, again, we've been talking about this for so long over on the right. You might think, well, the House is going to send another letter. Well, the Democrats are going to try to say it's nothing. Not this time. Not this time. And allow me to explain why. It is officially a point of contention that has surpassed the level of media kind of a counterweight. The media is not even on the same side about this anymore. Democrats aren't on the same side about this anymore. If this had come out before the 2024 elections, maybe. But it didn't. Now it's worse. We're going to talk about how in a couple of seconds. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening, everybody.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So, while some of the media are trying to essentially, I don't know how you obfuscate this. When you have Jake Tapper at CNN and Alex Thompson over at Axios, essentially writing this book on original sin, I've heard people make the case about why they wrote it, for money, things like that. I think that they wrote the book because they think it's over. And it is, in fact, one of the grossest misreads of all time. I think it is an opportunist looking at the Biden administration and thinking that this is just kind of shaving off the elderly, that there are a new group of progressives in the Democrat Party who are raring and ready to go. Your Jasmine Crockett's, your AOC's, your David Hogg's, your whatever. You've got the new crew. And the old crew, You can just kind of shove them off the cliff and then presto, there they go, they're on. And so Tapper believing, and I can't say the same about Alex Thompson because he does a lot of White House correspondent work for Axios, and I think it's a slightly different matter with him. But those two, seeing the opportunity, took it and said, all right, cool, let's seize it, let's move forward with it. Well, unfortunately for the crew that believed that it was just going to be pushing the elderly off a cliff and then these are the new Democrats, the new Democrats haven't exactly risen to the opportunity. They're also insane. When you have Jasmine Crockett, you have Ayanna Pressley, you have Ilhan Omar, and you have Kamala Harris, and all of the young Obama followers and the Bernie Sanders followers out there saying truly bonkers nonsense. It turns out that you really don't have anyone left to glue the party together. It turns out the David Axelrods were the ones holding the party together. The James Carvilles were holding the party, even Donna Brazile. And now they are being forced to essentially suck on lemons. So ABC's This Week, their Sunday show, they had on former RNC chair Reince Priebus, and he makes it very, very clear in the face of the legendary DNC Donna Brazile that they are going to have to eat this crow with both feet in their mouth.
First of all, people were put to shame, me and others out there that talked about Joe Biden's mental acuity. We were told he was sharp as a tack, he had a photographic memory, he was intense and brilliant. And what's amazing is the sources of this book were the same sources that told us that we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. It's a stutter. Stop talking about him. The fact is they were managing his decline in a nursing home in the White House.
Her face, for those who are listening or to the radio or the live stream, she looks as though she just bit into the worm of an apple. And she deserves it because, again, Priebus is correct. The Democrat media made it essential to, if not overtly say you were a bad, evil, stinky, terrible person like Jake Tapper did. He said, oh, Biden, how you're making fun of kids with stutters. Again, not just covering up a mental decline, but again, the president of the United States who was being whisked away for medical emergencies that may or may not have been related to the cancer. You don't know. The president refused to take medical work. And now you have people like on the other side of CNN, as well as David Axelrod, former major Democrat advisor, major guy. They're trying so hard to say, well, the important thing right now is that actually we just stop up any of this conversation. We just focus on wishing the former president good health.
His medical condition now, his announced medical condition now, do you believe that silences or delays a lot of conversations about his, last year and a half of his presidency for now?
I do want to notice that the gaslighting of the last year and a half, as though there was one day in October of 2023 that Biden was totally there, and then he got knocked up the side of the head with a coconut, as Kamala likes to say, and then presto, extreme dementia. No. But anywho, here's her question. Shouldn't we all just hold hands?
Yeah, well, I think those conversations are going to happen, but they should be more muted and set aside for now as he's struggling through this.
Okay. So, fantastic. Very, 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 very briefly. It would be worth suggesting that the Biden administration, who made the decision to cover all of this up, does not, in fact, get to choose when the scandal breaks. Do I find it rather suspicious that right after Axios released the audio from these particular interviews, that Biden announced his cancer diagnosis? Yes, I'd like to as well, not just sort through some of the audio, or even all of the audio provided by Axios, like Bradley Devlin and our journalism fellows did. I would like to hear perhaps what audio hasn't been shared yet. Is there audio somewhere where Joe Biden's aides accidentally on the hot mic mentioned that he needs to go get a treatment for his cancer, or Biden accidentally mentions to someone on a hot mic that he has prostate cancer. I don't buy the whole, Biden just started peeing a lot the other day, and so, man, presto. I got to tell you a little secret. Old men pee all the time. All the time. Get out of here. Unlikely to the extreme. And the Democrats, and not, by the way, not just Democrats, Meghan McCain came out and said essentially the same thing. I don't know if it's just my bias. Yep. Or background, but I don't want to hear anything else about Biden's health cover-up, tell-alls and interviews with staff, etc. Let the Biden family be in peace right now. This is all just so sad and imprudent. No. And I'm going to explain why. Number one, because this isn't actually about just Joe Biden. At best, it's a case of severe elder abuse, and Jill Biden should be dragged before Congress if it is discovered at all that she helped participate, as she likely did, in the cover-up of her husband's death and sacrifice. Again, the presidency is one of the most physically and mentally demanding jobs. It ages men. I mean, seriously, every time we have a new president, Barack Obama, it grayed all of his hair in 2 years. Donald Trump went from looking really fairly young and spry for his age. Now you can see it wearing on him. Every single president is worn down by being the leader of the free world. This idea that we're just going to keep him in there, cut out valuable time that he could have been spending perhaps with his grandchildren or his son, or just his kids in general. So I don't hear anyone actually pointing out that, in fact, there may have been that's in the best case, severe case of elder abuse. Likely, though, it is in fact a combined case of malice, deep, terrible, horrible, depraved malice. The idea that you would I really can't get over that. The idea that you would run a man knowing that he would die so you could have someone step up. That has nothing to do with Joe Biden. Nothing to do at all with Joe. That could be any person in that particular instance of that age and under those conditions. If anything, right now, I'm seeing the greater American public outraged that an American president in general would be treated in this way. Dr. Jill Biden and the party of Follow the Science seem to have put an old man out to pasture for political gain. And not just the political gain of hanging your hat on Jimmy Carter or trotting out pictures of George W. Bush and Barack sitting together at a ball game, but essentially making a mannequin, a real Weekend at Bernie's situation of an old man, cancer-ridden, dementia-ridden, so that you could install someone unelectable. Which, by the way, is also incredibly insulting to black people, to Indian people, to women. That the very first person from those demographics that you claim you care so much about, diversity and inclusion, you have to get the most unlikable person into that position. The only way you can get a black and Indian woman into the White House is to kill the guy in the Oval Office. My God. My God. Now, believe it or not, there are a lot of people in the media, even on the left, that aren't letting the Democrats get away with this. Even Brian Stelter, Mr. Potato Head himself, a man whom I made cry on national television, could not resist sniffing just a hint of common sense, though he tried to rebound from it. We'll catch that on the radio side back in a minute here. We're up on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
I'm seeing some prostate cancer survivors, people who have lived with this disease, who have been through this, expressing support, both condolences, but also support and cheering Biden on as he faces this. The timing, Jessica, is just extraordinary. We know from the statement from his personal spokesman that Biden learned of the diagnosis on Friday. Well, what was the biggest Biden story on Friday? It was the release of those audio excerpts from his conversations with Robert Hur back in 2023. This was the audio that Axios obtained, almost certainly from the Trump administration, showing memory lapses. And you heard a lot of people on Friday talking about that audio being hard to hear, even excruciating to hear. Biden showing his age on those audio tapes that had never been heard by the public until now. So on the day that story was breaking, Biden was facing this personal news. At least that's according to the statement from his personal spokesman.
I mean, guys, you've lost the trust and the credibility of the American people to simply trust you. Guys, just trust us. I mean, hey, yeah, the timing looks a little suspect, but it's totally fine. Even those on the left side of the media recognize this will kill the Democrats. This will kill them. I don't have the clip ready, but what Van Jones over on CNN made the point, this is going to haunt the Democrats for a very, very, very long time. Funnily enough, actually opposite on that panel with David Axelrod, even Chris Scataglia over from CBS and CNN made the wild, wild move of just reaching back and pimp slapping David Axelrod over this. Guys, let's just put it down for a minute nonsense.
This is a guy who is the president of the United States for 4 years and thought and ran for a second term, at which point he would have been in his mid-80s had he won and served. So that to me is a really serious conversation about how did we get to this point, given that there were a lot of signs that suggested that Joe Biden definitely should not have run for a second term. How did we get to this point? It's a media story. It's a politics story. It's a sort of transparency story. And again, I always say this, if the shoe was on the other foot, if Donald Trump, God forbid, had been diagnosed post-presidency with prostate cancer, and there were real questions about his acuity and his physical abilities while he was in office, do you think Democrats would say, let's just drop all of this? No, of course they wouldn't, because it's an important conversation to have.
Huh. Amazing. By the way, I do love some of the Democrats media going, how did we get here? How did this happen?
What happened here? Yeah, we're all trying to find the guy who did this and give him a spanking. It's obviously this guy, right?
Yes.
I mean, really though. Also, just as a quick note, Chris Scataglia, not on CBS formerly, but wrote for an MSNBC blog before he was on CNN, which again, doesn't make that at all better. This is going to get ugly. These House hearings are going to get ugly because now the members of the House, Democrats, have a serious decision to make. A serious decision to make. It's going to be something. So we're going to cut back in a second and then head over to Chris Clem over on Border Patrol stuff here and the immigration updates in just a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Well, the last time we were talking to him, he was a former Border Patrol chief and a man who didn't make any bones about keeping our southern border safe. Now he's coming hot off of a serious mission success, I'm told, working with the Department of Health and Human Services, a critical mission for a critical guy. Chris Clem, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And absolutely, coming right off, literally less than 2 weeks ago, I left Washington, D.C. after 100 days of the Trump administration, working specifically with Health and Human Services and how they play an important role in our border security when it comes down to the unaccompanied alien children that we encounter at the southern border.
So tell me about this mission. I mean, first of all, you're not the first guy that I've heard about who has these short stint style missions in Washington. Normally you see administrations hire people for life and then they're lording over us 30, 40, 50 years. But it seems the Trump administration has a mission specific focus. That's really unusual.
Well, I'll tell you this, I've obviously been heavily involved in border security for my 27 plus years as an agent. And then the 2 years I was retired. But, Tom Homan, who is President Trump's border czar, and I have been friends for a decade or more. And we made, remained in constant communication. He says, hey, look, we've figured out, the three-legged stool for border security and immigration enforcement for President Trump is going to be secure the southern border, the interior enforcement, which is the public safety and national security threats and all the gangs. And then the third stool, which is critically important to everybody, was fixing the problem when it comes to the unaccompanied alien children and finding the missing kids. And so Tom called me and he says, hey, we want to bring you up. Would you be willing to come up for 90 to 100 days or so to help us get things started and basically fix the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And, I had no plans of making a second career in the government, but, a 100-day mission on something so important, something that's so historic for any administration, let alone the President Trump administration, I just couldn't get there quick enough from the time the call rang to load up my car and driving cross country and finding a place to live. So that's how it started. And obviously they wanted me to stick around longer and remain permanent. I just, I told them that, my family was good for the 100 days. We had plans and life things that we want to do. And so that's what I did. And they supported everything that I needed to do and happily said, okay, thank you for your service. And we understand. And it was great. And I'll get into some of the more details here a little bit later, I guess.
So that's kind of the intricate parts of walking into an office and seeing perhaps the mess it was left in. When you're looking at, again, especially the situation regarding a lot of the children who are unknown, at least as far as their location, where they have gotten to, how they were lost, that kind of a mess. That was something that you had to reach both hands into. What were some of the initial thoughts right when you walked in the first time?
Well, I had a 3.5 day drive, so I thought about it the whole time from Arizona to Washington, D.C., knowing that I dealt with it firsthand for my whole career, and even more so when I was assigned to Washington, working directly with some of the departments. But when I got there wasn't anything that truly surprised me. I knew how messed up the practices and the policies under the Biden administration were. But there were some shocking situations where I was like, really? You accepted this as family verification? This is a digitally manipulated photograph. The people's feet are cut off, yet you accepted this as some kind of biological proof of relationship. And that ugly, stinking, rotten onion just got worse and worse as we peeled things back. So just to kind of level set, and for everybody in the audience and listeners and viewers, is every unaccompanied child, 17 and younger, that is encountered that is illegally in the United States is placed by law in the custody of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement. And the goal is to place them with a sponsor quickly. Ideally, a parent or a legal guardian, an adult family member, a third-party non-relative, and then a foster care. And the problem is the information that was put forth by sponsors in their applications was just riddled with fraud or incomplete, but in such a rush to get these kids into placement, they were just overlooking very simple and basic things. So that's why you have, the OIG report, Inspector General report, last year saying there was 300,000 that they couldn't find. It's because it's just like the old garbage in, garbage out theory. If you're giving me bogus information and we accepted that and we let the child go, and then when we go to follow up at a location and realize there's not even a building at that address, or it's an apartment complex with, thousands of people there, and there's no evidence that the child's ever there. This was the problem. And so what we immediately did is we just started changing the policies and practices. For the sake of brevity, we kind of use the same model for the U.S. foster care system. You have to provide, verifiable documentations, which is consistent with the United States I-9, verification documents that you would do if you were applying for a job, proof of income. Here's a novel concept. How about fingerprints for every adult that is in that household? Because we found cases where it was a family, but they had 6 or 7 other adults that were non-related, that were criminals in the household. Why would you place a child there?
So it's not just, we talk about things like regulation and rules and kind of standardization of certain practices in the United States quite often in politics, right? It's kind of a go-to, especially on this side of the aisle. What bewilders me, boggles my mind, is the number of environmental regulations and building code regulations that the government routinely imposes, manufacturing regulations. But all of a sudden, when it comes to standards for placing minors in the home of a sponsor, the number of standards and regulations evaporates. It's insane. And I don't mean insane as though this is not something that can be believed. I mean the only logical conclusion that you can come to at the end of the lack of care or regulation among these high numbers, this massive influx of illegal immigrant children into this country, to do this, well, to fail to do anything really about the lack of standards for the care of these children whatsoever, the placement of them, is in fact either evil or insane. There's no other option.
Yeah, you're right on. I mean, the number was 479,000 UACs that came in under the Biden administration. Now, I'm not saying that 479,000 sponsor applications were fraudulent or wrong. There was obviously legitimate cases and family ties and everything.
Right, but even a small percentage of a number that large would still be far too large.
Well, I'm going to throw something out there that we did a sampling through an internal investigation, and about 70% of the rough sample that we did of over like 1,500 cases, 70% of them had some elements of fraud and misinformation in the application. So we know that is, we know it's just rampant. So we're actually going back, and I'm going to get to that point in a second, but I want to hit something you mentioned because it's so important. And I am in no way am I dehumanizing or mischaractering a child or a person. But when my wife and I went to adopt a pit bull from the county shelter that was about to be euthanized, this dog was about to be discarded, we had to provide our driver's license, proof of income, and proof of residency. A bill that said, this is the house we live in. I have seen evidence of sponsor placements that had less verification than we did to get a dog that was basically on death row. That goes back to your point of how we have so many regulations, but we were willing to minimize, discard, throw out, or look the other way when it comes to human beings, especially children. So it is evil, it's insane, and it is criminal that we allowed this to happen. So that was my marching orders to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, to what I told the Secretary, what I told the White House, is that I was going to put policies and practices in place to end that the United States deserved better. Trump says we're going to make America great again. Secretary Kennedy says we're going to make America healthy again. That includes our agencies. And that's what we did with the Office of Refugee Resettlement, is we put policies and practices in place. We changed foundational rules and put interim rules in place to make sure that we are in a position, anybody, whether it's an employee or a smuggler or a sponsor, if you are knowingly, willingly, and complicit in criminal activity, look out, we're coming for you. And we did a lot more than that with our partner agencies, and I can get to that after, here in a minute.
Just in the last couple of minutes we have here, I do want to talk about things that you guys are doing with the partner agencies, and maybe you can lead into that with this question that I've been asked a lot from people who tune into the show. There are a lot of administrations who, talk a big game on the campaign trail, right? They say, oh, we're going to do all this stuff. We're going to come in, we're going to overhaul it, and it's going to be, brand new, shiny, squeaky clean, all that stuff. And now you've spent 100 days in the administration. You are now out. You've seen the inside, the belly of the beast, so to speak. Do you see an administration that is actually getting some things done, or has once again slapped on the campaign trail coat of polish?
No, I got to tell you, you're exactly right. I was 6 days a week, no less than 6 days a week. I was on a daily call with the White House, National Security Council, Homeland Security Council, and Department of Justice, Department of Defense, DHS, some of the sub-agencies. We were working 6-7 days a week on this particular topic, really on that three-legged stool, securing the border, the interior enforcement, and the kids. I was able to create an interagency task force, if you will, an interagency war room, as I called it, where we were going through every case for the last couple years and identifying problems, connecting dots. Where do we have lack of information for children? Sitting right there in the room is ICE HSI special agents, ICE enforcement removal operation officers, FBI special agents, Office of Inspector General. We had connectivity to the Social Security Administration, Department of all there working to go, number one, find the kids, making sure that they're either alive or back into making sure they're in their removal process with the appropriate sponsor, and then criminal charges on any criminal activity we found. I mean, it really was something that I knew was happening under Trump 45, but to actually be up there inside the department at the White House regularly at meetings, this was something that I'm glad you brought it up, because it is so important, because this is just one of the many things that the administration
right. I mean, any administration in
yeah.
the country is 500,000 moving parts,
Yeah.
and that's putting it conservatively. So anything that we hear out of people who are fresh out of the administration, to hear about the agencies actually working together and it not being the every man for himself, the kind of Biden-esque bloat and goat style administration. It certainly brings about a level of optimism that usually is festering cynicism.
No doubt. This was something that I'm long in the teeth now, but this impressed me. And it was one of those things that was kind of the bittersweet part of me. Again, you put your life on hold to go do something so important, but really all you did was put your calendar on hold. Life events to still continue. So I had to honor the commitment to my family and come back. That was the bittersweet part, because it was so incredibly awesome to see the power of government working for the right reasons. I hope everybody that views and listens to this show understands that there are a team of patriots up there that are knocking out of the park every day, and there is nothing getting cold on anybody's plate, especially when you're talking about the likes of Stephen Miller, Tom Homan, who are leading the charge in these particular areas that I was focused on.
I think you're right on the money. And again, thanks for your time in the administration, getting to work on some of this stuff. I wish we had more time. I'll see if Luke can maybe schedule a bit of a longer time out with us another time. But Chris, Clem, thank you so much for your work. We're excited to see you back here in the private sector with us again, because there's so much more to be done.
Well, I appreciate that and look forward to the next conversation.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
You guys know, believe it or not, I actually had far more in the news side of things to cover tonight. We didn't even get to touch on the Supreme Court of the United States ruling 8-1 that the president can, in fact, lift the executive temporary protective status of illegal immigrants from Venezuela. We didn't talk about Trump's big, beautiful bill passing the House Budget Committee 21-16. We didn't even get to talk about James Comey or Sesame Street. Man, we're going to have to touch on those things tomorrow. There is one very, very time-sensitive thing. And no, I'm not talking about the video of the girl who says that...
I just need to remind y'all again, everyone who is ginger, who has red hair, those are black people.
I'm not talking about that. There's actually something far more time-sensitive that's very, very important. It's not Hillary Clinton, and it's not Governor Tim Walz. It's, in fact, the most amazing work I've seen in quite a while. So there is a golden rule of broadcasting, and this golden rule of broadcasting is never, ever, ever mention a similar show on your show unless they're your guest, and I'm going to break that. So the guys over at Ruthless, the Ruthless podcast crew, that would be John Ashbrook, Michael Duncan, Comfortably Smug, as well as Josh Holmes. They have released a little bit of a teaser for their episode breaking tomorrow morning on an investigation into Democrat Mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. It's really great. It's with Harmeet, Dhillon. You guys got to check this out.
This afternoon, we've opened up an investigation into the mayor of Chicago's statements over the weekend that look like racial preferences in hiring there of a particular background, which is illegal. Yeah. And so we're opening up an investigation to see if that's indeed happening. And so things are happening in real time. You have a head of the Civil Rights Division who's in touch with social media. A lot of information comes to me that way, and then we open investigations. We work with the EEOC in cases like this one I just mentioned. We work with Department of Health and Human Services the GSA and Department of Education in cases of higher education discrimination, anti-Semitism, and DEI.
That is going to be a banger. Now, the particular clip that they are talking about, in which Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago decided to, racially discriminate with taxpayer dollars, is this one right here. We've got that loaded up. Yeah.
Some detractors that will push back on me and say, the only thing that the mayor talks about is the hiring of black people. No, what I'm saying is when you hire our people, we always look out for everybody else. We are the most generous people on the planet. I don't know too many cultures that have play cousins. That's how generous we are. We just make somebody a family member, right? That's just how we are. And so business and economic neighborhood development, the deputy mayor is a black woman. Department of Planning and Development is a black woman. Infrastructure deputy mayor is a black woman. Chief Operations Officer is a black man. Budget director is a black woman. Senior advisor is a black man. And I'm laying that out because when you ask, how do we ensure that our people get a chance to grow their business?
Yeah, that's pretty wild. By the way, imagine being one of the staffers or one of the people in those positions who is not being told that you've been appointed to a position because you're experienced, because you're intelligent, because you've done prior work that would benefit the citizens of Chicago, but because your skin color and your genitals happen to be the appropriate kind we're looking for today. So that'll be a good one. So head over to Ruthless Podcast. They're not sponsoring this. They don't know I'm doing this. But head over to the Ruthless Podcast, RUTHLESS Podcast over on YouTube. You're going to find that tomorrow. I'll be watching that one when it comes out, because anything that gets this DEI garbage thrown out and the rights of Americans enshrined and defended based on merit and the unalienable side of rights, and not the unchangeable kinds of skin color, for example. Yeah, that's a fight that is absolutely worth fighting. With that said, there's so much more to get to tonight, but we're going to have to cover it tomorrow. This has been the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.